All right, in this section of the course, we're going to take a look at a Netflux example. Now, if you've been following the spring seminars and a lot of the videos and the speeches that Josh Long gives, I am stealing directly from this because it's a good example. We're going to move through quite a bit of content kind of fast. We're not going to dive in too deep, but I want to get our hands on and show you an end-to-end reactive application. So we're going to be using MongoDB, use the reactive driver with MongoDB, and we're going to create a little REST application to return back movies from Netflix, and we'll be able to do some streaming events with them. So we're going to show you a couple different things, but it's a chance for us to get our hands on using reactive types. And I've seen Josh's presentation a few times. It's a really good and entertaining presentation. He's a great presenter. But we're going to slow it down, and we'll do this in more of a traditional Spring approach, so you guys have the familiar design patterns and formats that we're going to be working with. And again, keep in mind that this section of the course, the next few videos, are just to get our hands on. I want to get our feet wet with doing some of the reactive stuff so that we can actually see it in action, because I kind of like to take things out, kick the tires, and see where things go and see how it behaves. So this is a good chance for us to start getting used to using these reactive types and seeing how the new reactive stuff in Spring 5 is going to behave. So I think there's a lot of good content here. I think you're really going to enjoy getting our hands on and doing some reactive programming with Spring Framework 5. All right, in this video we are going to create a new project, and we're going to use Spring Boot Initializer for it, and I'm going to do it right from inside of IntelliJ. So I'm just going to come in and say new project, and we can see that we have the option to use the Spring Initializer. If you are not running IntelliJ, you can go over to start.spring.io and follow along through the website, but this is just kind of a handy front end that IntelliJ provides for us. And of course, I'm going to put this into GitHub, so you'll be able to download it right from my repository up on GitHub as well. So I'm going to go step through this. I'm going to create that new project now. And we'll be calling it the Netflix example. And we are going to say next. And on this, we don't need a lot here. Going through this, we really don't need dev tools. We do want Project Lombok for sure. And then we are going to be playing with MongoDB. And of course, I need to come over here to Spring Boot 2 so I can get MongoDB reactive and embedded. So that'll give me all the dependencies that I need for running reactive MongoDB, and I'm using embedded MongoDB, so you don't have to worry about setting up a Mongo instance for yourself. And now I'm going to say next. And courses, actually I want to change this. So we'll do Reactive Spring. I'm going to create a new folder. Won't let me paste, so Netflix. So we're going to go ahead and create that new folder. Oh, it already changed to it, so we'll go ahead and do that. That's the path that I want to store it in. And actually, just double checking, let's do this as a Gradle project. And Java 1.8, just double checking the settings here. Yeah, just going to change it up and do it as a Gradle project. So now we are doing this. I'm going to click off auto import. And when you're doing Gradle, a lot of times you want to be using the Gradle wrapper rather than your system installed. So that is the recommended thing to do. So I'm going to say OK here, and we will open up this project. And let's take a quick peek at the build.gradle file. You can see that we added in the snapshot and milestone because we are still running on a milestone direct release of Spring Boot. I'm recording this in early September of 2017, so Spring Boot 2.0 has not gone GA yet. And then we can see down here on line 30 the dependencies that I brought in. So I brought in the Spring Starter for MongoDB, the MongoDB Reactive, Project Lombok, which we'll be having some fun with. And then on the bottom line there is we have the embedded Mongo. And we might want to be changing that, we'll see. Yeah, actually, I'm going to change that to compile here. So we will be using that as our database just as we play with the application. And one thing you want to do is, since we have Project Lombok installed, come up here to settings, and we want to go down to version control, build compiler, Java compiler, or I'm sorry, annotation processors. And we want to enable annotation processing. So if you do not do this, Project Lombok and IntelliJ are not very happy together. Because remember that Project Lombok does enable annotation processing when it does the compile. That's how the Project Lombok magic happens. So we want to tell IntelliJ to enable annotation processing. So we'll say OK. And that is our new project, and I will add this to GitHub, and you will be able to download this project. And just as a side note, as releases of Spring Boot come out, I will update the GitHub source control for the newer releases of Spring Boot. All right, in our example, we are going to be using one entity that we're going to be persisting to the MongoDB database. And what it's going to be is a movie object. So let's go ahead and create a new package. And we'll create a new class. Call the class movie. And before I get too far, I am going to go in and create a GitHub branch. Call it domain. And this is something that I do. So we were on master. That's where I initialized the project at. And now all the code changes for this lesson are going to be on that. So you'll be able to compare and contrast any changes that I make as I work through this. So of course, we're going to be using that document. So the document makes it a MongoDB entity, or I should say MongoDB document. And the way Spring Data MongoDB works, if you have a string property called ID, that will get set as the ID property. And then we also want to do private string, and we're going to set up a title. And that'll be our movie title. So pretty simple Pojo here for us. And let's make this not null. I think we want that flavor of not null. Yep, my mistake here. It's supposed to be non-null. That's a Lombok annotation. So get rid of that import. Thought something looked odd there. And then also we want to take advantage of some of the other Lombok features. So we'll do at data. And data is a convenience annotation that brings in getter, setter, required args, toString equals hashcode and value. So that is like a convenient annotation to bring in these, 6 different annotations. And we are getting a required args. Let's do a no args constructor also. And Project Lombok will decorate our class with all the getters and setters equals toString method, hashcode method. So it really saves us a lot of boilerplate typing here. And then the one additional class that we're going to need is a movie event. And keep things simple. I'm going to put it also in the domain folder, or package, I should say. And we are going to do a string. And the movie event is an object that we'll be playing with later in the course. And we'll also treat him with some Lombok annotations. And we can get away with data no args constructor. So that, again, this is not going to get persisted to Mongo, but we will be using it in the demonstration upcoming lessons for sure. So that completes setting up our data model for the project. You can see it's pretty simple, so nothing too complex there. We're just going to have a movie object that we'll be saving into MongoDB and getting out and using that to demonstrate some of the more interesting stuff that we have to do with reactive streams in Spring Framework 5. Okay, the next thing that we want to do is create a repository. So we're going to be using Spring Data for MongoDB. And if you're familiar with it, there's a Mongo repository. Where is it at? There it is, Mongo repository. And this brings up a specialized repository for MongoDB, but this isn't what we want. We actually want this flavor of it. Where is he at? Reactive Mongo repository. There he is. So very similar, but it's a reactive implementation. You can see here that the return types are the Spring reactive types. So we have the monos and fluxes, and this is a specialized repository using the reactive features of MongoDB. So this is what we're going to set up. And let's go ahead and I'm going to go in and create a new package because I like to keep the repositories in a package called repositories. And we'll call it movie repository. And we will add that to Git for you. And then just as a reminder there, so that's the type. So that first generic is the type, so that's going to be movie. And then the string is going to be the ID, and we actually want to make this an interface. That will behave much better for us. So you can see here, a pretty simple implementation. This will give us the Spring Data Mongo will give us the implementation of this at runtime, so it'll work out quite nicely for us. Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and initialize some data in this video. And I did make actually two mistakes that I found when I was recording this or preparing to record it. I do need to add in the all args constructor here on the movie. I thought it was going to get inherited from the data, but at least IntelliJ thought it was not there at least. So I went ahead and added that. I want to make you aware of that. And then in the dependencies, I had one mistake there. I forgot to bring in the WebFlux dependency. So I've got on line 33 there, you can see that I've gone in and added the Spring Boot starter for WebFlux, which gives us the WebFlux framework within Spring Framework 5. Now let's come over here. And I've created a class under package Bootstrap, and I'm calling it Bootstrap CLR, which is for command line runner. And if you're not familiar with it, this is a Spring Boot specific class, and basically you implement that and add it as a component. And on startup, once the Spring context is started up and running, it's going to execute this run method and pass in any command line arguments you had. We're not too concerned about the command line arguments, but we do want to execute some code. So what this class is doing, it's taking an instance of our reactive movie repository and on the constructor. And just as a reminder, I think it was in Spring 1.4.3, they removed the AutoWire requirement. So you could have, prior to Spring 1.3, you would have had to write the class like this, but because we are on Spring 5 and beyond 1.4.3 or Spring 4.3, we don't need to. That constructor will automatically get auto-wired for us. And another thing I like to do, highly recommend, is use construction injection, and we do a final variable there. So that way that cannot change after this object's been constructed. Now, getting into the more interesting stuff, we are going to take the movie repository and call delete all and then block, because remember, this is just going to return back a mono publisher. It's not going to do anything until we do something with it. And here you can see on line 30, I've actually stolen the movie names that Josh likes to use in his presentations. So we have Silence of the Lambdas, Aeon Flux, Enter the Mono, The Fluxinator, Back to the Future, Meet the Fluxes, and Lord of the Fluxes. So these are some movie titles that we're going to utilize for our purposes of this little project. Now on line 32, we are doing a map function. So that map is going to basically take everything from that flux, and we're going to pass it in. So we're passing in it as a title, and we're doing a new movie. We're calling the constructor there with the title, and then we're going to generate a random UID. Next in the stream is to do a flat map, and we are going to use the movie repository and call save on it. Next, we create a subscriber to it, and we're going to output it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this running. So this will give us the output to the console of the movies. And let's see here, I got that. We'll go ahead and start him up. So now we can see that the movies have been loaded up inside of MongoDB, and that's And this output here I have highlighted is actually from line 35 where we're doing that system output. Now we can actually refactor this a little bit and make it a little more elegant because we don't like this little block here. So we can get rid of that. We can make this into one big statement. So by doing this, we can do then many inside of this and effectively just take this up to there. Now we need to make one little tweak here. This syntax takes a little getting used to there, but now this is all happy again. So now we have things a little bit cleaner. So we're done. Delete all, then many, and it's going to take the output of this flux into the then many, and then we're going to call a subscriber on that. So this is subscriber is actually coming up to this guy here. So kind of interesting how the syntax works. It takes a lot of getting used to, especially if you're new to this reactive stuff. Let's go ahead and bounce this and make sure that's still working as we expect it to. So we can see that our movies are now loaded there. So nice little refactoring there to get everything running in one statement. I will check this into GitHub under the branch init-data, so you can go ahead and check it out. And in the next video, we will take a look at setting up the service layer. Now in this video, we want to go ahead and implement our service layer. And you can see on the screen here, I have an interface for movie service. And we have three methods here that we're going to implement. One is events. So this is going to be emitting a stream of events for our little application, our demo application here for Netflix. And the next one we have there on line 28 is get movie. So we're going to get movie by ID and then get all movies. And actually I'm going to rename that. That's a little more friendly name. And now let's go ahead and implement that interface. And I'm just doing an option enter there. In IntelliJ, I'm going to say implement interface and say OK here. And this bring up a stub of that interface for us. Of course, we're going to add that to Git. Now, of course, we're going to need to use our repository. I want private and not static. That's a mistake, but I do like to make the injected properties or injected objects final so they cannot be changed. Just a good habit. We're going to inject in a movie repository. Got to add in a constructor for that. And let's make this a service. And just as a reminder, I think it was in Spring 4.2, they made it so that when you have constructors like this, the auto wire is optional. So when Spring Context runs, because this is a Spring managed component and we have a constructor taking in a single argument, Spring will automatically auto wire in an instance of the movie repository for us, which is being provided by Spring Data Mongo. Now let's go ahead and implement some of these. Let's go ahead and do the easy ones first. So that's just going to go in and return by ID right from the repository. And we're going to do a find all there, which is going to return back a flux of movies that are in the database. Now this one gets a little more interesting to implement. We're going to use a little trickery here, show you some stuff. Oops. And we're going to use the generate. And that's going to, this is a sync operation. And this is a way for us to go ahead and configure an emitter that's going to generate objects for us. And I'm getting a little error there because what I did not do is come over here to movie event, and we are going to do a all args constructor, make our life a little bit easier. And that should clear this up. So now that is happy. And the next thing we want to come back over here is do a delay. So what this is going to do is a little bit of code here on line 26 to 29. That's going to return back a flux of movie events, and we're saying generate, and that's going to create a new movie event with a date stamp, unique date stamp, and we're going to do that every 1 second. As long as the subscriber is subscribed, it's going to continue to run every 1 second for us. So it's going to basically emit out events that we can tap into for our processing. All right, in this video, we are going to take a look at implementing our movie controller. So this is going to be a controller, and I want to point out that with Spring, the WebFlux stuff uses the same exact annotations that we're all used to with Spring MVC. That is an option that we can utilize. So let's go ahead and make this a REST controller. And just as a reminder, all a REST controller really is a convenience annotation that gives us controller and response body in one handy annotation. And of course, we're going to need private final, an implementation of the movie service. We'll go ahead and inject that movie service for ourselves. Now let's add in a mapping. So map the controller to movies. And let's do a get mapping here. And we want to look up by ID again. Now, of course, we want to do the path variable. And just as a refresher, the way this is going to work, because we have this named ID, and this is ID, so the path variable is going to match up that. So that's a convention within the Spring framework. Also do a get mapping here. Do not cut and paste, that's a bad habit. But in this case, we just want to get by ID. And also a get mapping there. So this will get invoked when we are asking for a specific ID. Otherwise, we're going to return back all the movies. And again, here we want that path variable. And now we want to go ahead and implement our methods. So let's go ahead and talk about our movie service. We want to get events and pass in the ID value, like so. And we want to get a movie by ID in this case. And then finally, we want to get all movies. Oh, whoops, a little typo there. Just wondering why I was not happy. I had fat-fingered the code there. So let's do a quick review of this. So we have a REST controller. If you're familiar with Spring MVC, this is going to all look very familiar, except now we're returning back the reactive types. So this is going to be functioning as a REST controller with reactive types. And just as a quick reminder, so we're going to auto-wire in an instance of the movie service that we defined in the last video. And we have three methods that are going to get invoked here. If we just do a get on movies, the get mapping here is going to get returned. So we'll get all movies. We're going to ask the movie service, which is going to inquire against MongoDB to give us a stream of movies. So being that it's a flux object being returned, we're going to have 0 or many being returned to our service. Next, we have get mapping /ID. So that's going to allow us to retrieve back a movie by the ID value. We're taking in the path variable and asking the movie service to return back a mono of this case. And just as a reminder, a mono is going to be 0 or 1 instance of the movie. And then finally, up on line 26, this is our movie events, which we're going to have a little bit more fun with. This is going to stream back movie events. And in this case, we're going to ask the service by ID to generate movie events. So in the next video, we'll go ahead and play with running this and take a look at how it behaves. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at running our little application here. And what I need to do is come in and actually start it up. And we can see Spring Boot initializing, goes through the startup routine, and we can see that there is data that has been loaded. And there's actually a problem right now, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, but I am going to point it out coming up. So let's come over here and jump over to terminal. And I am going to go ahead and do a curl command against localhost. And we can see that we return back a bunch of movies, which is exactly what we want. Now, if we come over here and copy in a movie ID, got to do a slash, and we can see that we're not getting a value back. And if you've got good eyes, which I did not initially have, you can see the problem right here is I have the title going in for the movie ID. Now, that's interesting. So the title is going in, and what's happening is I made a small mistake in setting this up. If I come over to IntelliJ, you can see that I have the ID Silence of the Lambs, so Mongo is happily taking that in as an ID value for some interesting reason, and I'm generating in the UID here. So what I can do is come in here to my Bootstrap class, and what we want to do is just pass in the title here rather than a UID value, and allow Mongo to go ahead and determine that. Let's take a look at movie. And what I need to change here is, because I'm saying not null, is I'm going to change that to required args. And now that's going to give us a constructor for just title. So we said not null, so we're going to get a constructor created on that class by Project Lombok. Come back over here to the repository. We might need to stop this and do a compile. Nope, Gradle. Actually, I can do that right from IntelliJ. Let's just do a build project, and that should clean that up. I'm trying to invoke the compiler, which should give us that. Taking a little closer look at this, that movie does have it being injected, but I'm getting a false flag there on the IDE, thinking that it can't do that. So because I changed that in Project Lombok, I think it messed up the IntelliJ index. So I can actually prove this to you by going in and running the application, which is going to compile it. We'll see that it does function fine. So when you see something odd like that, especially in IntelliJ, which isn't terribly often, if you come up to File and then invalidate caches, restart, it'll probably clear that right up. And now we can see over here, down at the bottom of the screen, where the movie ID, that is indeed a Mongo ID that's been generated. And then we also have Silence of the Lambdas as the title. So that's going to work out a lot better. So let's go ahead and take a look at this now on the command line. And remember, because I restarted the database, all those IDs are going to change. So now if I come back here, we can do slash, and I bet this is going to work a lot better. And now we can see that does work. Now if I wanted to do that, and remember our mapping here, come back to the controller. Let's take a look at the events. So remember that the events URL is going to be /ID events. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. And we can go ahead and grab our ID value. And you can see that the events is just sitting there hanging out. It's not really returning. That's because we have a stream of events coming through from the server, and we're not really getting a termination. So unfortunately, or that's just kind of the way curl, I shouldn't say unfortunately, that's just the way curl behaves. We're not getting back to the proper type because we're streaming out events. So what we need to do is change over to server sent events. And effectively, let's go over here and take a look at the controller. And what's happening is the curl client's looking at for a JSON object that's going to come back. So it's getting a buffer and it's buffering things up and nothing's happening. So what we want to do is a server-side event here, because by default says it's reproducing JSON. Nope. Not that media type. And now we're going to be able to tell curl to expect a text stream. So let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and restart this. See that Spring Boot is now restarting. Now curl's going to know to continue listening that there's more data coming from the server. And it's not going to sit there and wait to buffer everything. So let's go ahead and get our movies. And now let's say, we'll just grab a movie ID here. Now let's say events. Now we can see every second we're going to get a movie event emitted. But because we change over, you can see here, now because we're saying that this is going to stream, we're going into our service, come up here, and this guy's sitting here emitting every second a movie. And effectively, this code will just sit here in a loop and run like this forever. Every second a movie event is going to be emitted to our client, and it's just going to get that stream of events for forever, effectively, until I say stop. Now that termination is going to happen, get sent up to the server, and say that that subscriber has gone away, and our publisher is going to stop publishing because the subscriber went away. Okay, that concludes the section on our Netflix example. So a lot of fun stuff here. I really liked it. I like getting my hands dirty with the reactive stuff. There's going to be a lot more content on reactive programming coming up in the course. So this was just to get our feet wet. So I hope you appreciated this section of the course, and I hope you took the chance to get some hands-on playing with these reactive types, because it really is a paradigm shift moving over to reactive programming from the traditional style of program that we have been dealing with, where everything happens in blocks and it's really imperative and we can just do whatever we want. It's kind of like A, B, C, D, and E. So when you start getting into reactive types, it does change the game a little bit, and you can have some fun with it. Like you saw how we have that emitter where we're sending out an event every second. So this is something that would have been difficult to do in a traditional Java environment prior to having these reactive libraries that we can utilize.